All right, guys, just want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here are doing our 2025 quarterback transfer portal impact editions, ranking them 1 through 10. Start with some honorable mentions, then work our way through the list. A lot of action in this year's cycle of the transfer portal. Everything is pretty much set in stone. I don't think too many surprises are left in store, so these rankings should hold throughout this offseason. Getting us started with those honorable mentions, this is a pretty interesting list. Some pretty noted quarterbacks here, a lot of experience to go around for these different schools. Chandler Morris had a nice resurgent career there for UNT, moving to Virginia now, replacing Anthony Colandrea, who's going to go and join Dan Mullen. I think those are two very interesting additions for those schools. I think Maverick McIver, a very underrated addition. I think he fits the system at Western Kentucky very well. Had 3,800 yards and 30 touchdowns this past year for Albaline Christian. So I think that's going to be an impact player in the CUSA. Braylon Braxton played pretty well for Marshall and Charles Huff over the back half of the year, ended the season of 19 touchdowns and 2 picks. He's going to follow his head coach to USM. Bayo Perbola, maybe he'll be an impact addition for Missouri. And I think Joey Aguilar going to UCLA is also a pretty underrated one. They will be talked about more throughout the offseason. Who's the one guy here you're kind of circling, Nick?
Yeah, we'll talk about Morris for sure. I think Morris is a great fit at UVA. This is a guy that's been college football for a while. He started at Oklahoma during COVID, then spent a couple of years at TCU where there wasn't a whole lot of success. Played in 2023, had 12 touchdowns and 5 picks, about 1,500 yards passing on, about 200 attempts. But then he went to UNT and really ramped up the attempts, had a really strong season this year, 3,700 yards passing, 31 touchdowns to 12 picks, was really solid in the pocket. He was more confident this year, also ran the ball a little bit more, had 4 rushing touchdowns as well. He was part of a high-flying offense, and I think when you look at this Virginia team going forward, they played a lot better this year than people expected. I think this was a team that people were not really high on coming into this year. A lot of question marks about Tony Elliott and what he could do coaching this team and this offense. Now I think Elliott has a great quarterback to work with. Morris this is a guy that I really like watching. He really stands strong in the pocket. Like I said, a guy that's been around, 6 foot 190 roughly, really accurate at times as well. Very good deep ball threat. He had a 96-yard passing touchdown for UNT this season. Really strong arm. This is the guy I'm keeping an eye on. I think this UVA team is certainly going to be a sleeper team in the ACC next year. I think a lot of it starts with having a really strong veteran quarterback in Chandler Morris.
Now we move to number 10 on our list, Mark Gronowski. This is a very interesting player. I was very excited when I seen he entered the portal. Not all that excited with the place he decided to transfer to. Iowa, this is a team that certainly doesn't have the most complex offense this year. They're pretty good on offense due to Caleb Johnson really carrying the load. They still couldn't really throw the ball that well at all. And this is a guy who is one of the most storied quarterbacks, I'd say, in FCS history. Winning 2 national championships, a Walter Payton Award from 22 to 23, went 29-1 as a starter, went 12-3 this past season. But he's got, pretty much 4 years of starting experience under his belt. Didn't play in 21 due to a torn ACL. Nice dual threat player, though. I like the size of 6'3", 230. Shows good touch on downfield throws. Has a nice, tight fastball. Watching tape on him, though, Nick, he does have a bit of a slower release. Can he fire in the tight windows with consistency in the Big Ten will be a big question mark. It looks like he's going to be out till June or July of a shoulder injury. This isn't the most complex offense to learn, but you certainly want to be out there and competing with these guys, learning their strengths and weaknesses as much as possible. So that's something I think this might going to set him back potentially. What do you think of Gronowski here, Nick? Because this guy was a very good quarterback, and I think he might do well. But for Iowa, I guess the talent of, the level of talent around him kind of does compare to the one he had with the Jackrabbits because it's not all that good. The receivers are pretty subpar. The running backs, they'll be above average. But this is going to be a very compelling challenge here. But he can really uplift this offense if he can provide that same level of play that he did at South Dakota State.
It's certainly an interesting one, plugging in a guy that was really strong at the FCS level, 2 national championships, a really good player overall, 23 touchdowns, 7 picks this year, 2,700 yards passing, 6'3", 230, a really physical runner as well that's improving his ground game, 380 and 10 scores for him this year. He's a big physical player. I think the physicality is phenomenal with him. Really good touchdown field. A bit of an odd move, right? You really don't see quarterbacks going to Iowa. I saw a lot of people giving flack to this move on social media when it happened. I think it's a fair assessment here. This is a guy I think could have probably done a little bit better than landing at Iowa. I think that's why it lands so far down our list at number 10, because the move doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the player. If he plays up to the level he did at South Dakota State, I think it certainly works well for Iowa, who showed a lot more pulse on offense this year as he sort of begin to revamp that offense that was in the Stone Ages forever. I don't know if I love this move. I think it certainly has, a lot of potential to develop pretty well, but the jury is going to be significantly out on this early on. Going to have to see how this develops throughout the season. I question what this will look like going forward.
Now moving to number 9, a pretty interesting one here, Nick, one that probably people won't talk about because it is in the MAC. DeQuan Finn, though, very underrated addition. He went to Baylor this past season and things didn't work out. Started the first 2 games, was a bit shaky, then he got hurt and ended up losing his job to Sawyer Robertson. Now he transfers back to the conference that he dominated in 2023, winning offensive MVP for Toledo, went 11-2, 2,600 yards passing, had 563 along with 7 touchdowns rushing, had over 3,000 total yards for Toledo, and now he goes back to this conference, Nick, for a team that they're going to need some help. Brett Gabbert started many years there, was never really that great. He was always above average, but he really didn't take them to that next level. Miami of Ohio, of course, they play tremendous defense. This is a very fun team to watch. Offense has always been kind of held back, though. They're losing some big-time players. They lose a couple of really good receivers. That's not great for them. But I think the best way to offset that was to provide a quarterback that is a phenomenal runner. This guy is very elusive, really good speed. I love his abilities in the speed option game. He does a pretty good job with off-platform throwing. He's still kind of limited in terms of upside as a passer. He's not just going to be a drop-back passer that carves you up. But this guy is a playmaker, Nick, a productive one at that. And again, he did very good against this conference in his time at Toledo. Ended up losing to this Redhawks team in Detroit in the conference title game. Now he joins them. And I think that this coaching staff led by Chuck Martin, they're going to be able to help identify this player and some of his weaknesses and how he can progress in those areas. I think this is just a perfect match. A+ for DeQuan Finn and Miami.
A Detroit product, hoping to get back to Detroit and Ford Field and win a conference title with the Miami Redhawks, a team that won the conference title in 23, went back to the conference title game this past season in 24. DeQuan Finn was a player I was very high on at Toledo. I absolutely loved watching him play. I thought he really had a strong season in 2023. Obviously won a lot of awards based off that season, and rightfully so. So, 63% comp rate, 2,600 yards passing, 22 touchdowns to 9 picks, was really good on the ground as well that year. He is a true dual threat quarterback that could do a lot for you on the ground game. 563 and 7 scores in 2023. Also had 631 and 9 scores in 2022. Didn't really work out for him at Baylor. Was definitely not the best fit in my opinion. They went through a lot of different quarterback movement. They changed a lot of things around. And ultimately, he heads back to the MAC this time, heading to Miami, Ohio. I kind of forgot this move happened, but I think this is a great move for him. This is a guy that's really talented. I love what he can do. I was a huge fan of him at Toledo. He can really hit you in tough angles, really solid. Obviously, the passing game is a little capped with him, but he's a runner that can really elevate your offense. This is a Miami team that plays really strong defense in the MAC, which is why they've been in back-to-back conference title games. But adding a dynamic quarterback that could really throw off the game for the defense, for your opposing defenses, could be what this team needs to get over the top and win the MAC again after winning it in 2023. This is a sleeper team. Certainly, in my opinion, they play really strong physical football, and plugging Finn in makes this team just a little bit better and puts them on that national radar. They certainly have to be the MAC favorites opening things up, in my opinion, and it goes a long way thanks to Finn leading this roster.
Now I move to number 8, Miller Moss, leaving USC for Louisville. How things can come full circle for you, Nick. This is really what kind of jump-started his career, is that near 400-yard performance and 6 scores in the bowl game to cap off 2023 for Miller Moss that made him the starter in 24. And as a USC fan, I thought this guy was really good. He just wasn't great. And if you want to play quarterback at USC, you got to be great. The last game against Washington, where he had 3 interceptions, the one that was tipped, but still was a pretty poor game from him. Lost. That ended up being his final start for USC. Kind of showed that he's not the guy to really lead that system, and max out their potential. This guy's a good football player, though, Nick. Good short and intermediate accuracy. Really throws with confidence against tight windows. I thought he was a good distributor of the football. He can really throw on the run as well. Deep accuracy isn't the greatest. Arm strength isn't the best either. I think the biggest thing with him is the vision can be poor. And he doesn't always have the greatest diagnosing skills in zone. It's very inconsistent. This is a perfect fit, though, for this Louisville offense. This is very similar to quarterbacks they've had in the past, Nick. He really fits Jeff Brum's system to a T. He's going to have guys like Chris Bell and Colin Lacey catching the football next year. And again, it's unfortunate that things didn't work out at USC, but this guy is a good quarterback nonetheless, Nick. I was very impressed with what he was able to do in his short time for USC. I wish him the best. I was very happy with how he played for the most part. At times, though, the ball wasn't great, and that's what led to them losing football games. Unfortunate how it worked out, though, but I think here at Louisville, this is the guy who's going to put on a great season. He's going to have them in consideration to win the conference.
Yeah, I think it's a shame how it ended up for Miller Moss. I was really high on him after that bowl performance. Thought he could really take that team to the next level. Looked really good against LSU in week 1. Kind of unraveled, didn't really work out. The USC season didn't go their way, but now he moves on and finds himself in a really good spot. I think he'll fit great in this offense. I think the coaching staff here is phenomenal, and this is a guy that's really good with the short accuracy and certainly over the middle intermediate. Crossing routes are very strong with him. He's really solid. Throws with a lot of confidence into extremely hard and tight windows to throw into. The deep ball accuracy obviously is a concern, but I think this is going to be an offense that's going to be more short game. They're going to try and hit you over the middle, curl routes, things like that, trying to attack the middle of the field, slant routes, things of that nature. I think this is going to be a really strong fit. This Louisville team, they've played good football the past 2 years. They looked good this year at times. The defense has shown some strength. The offense has looked good as well. I think this is a guy you plug in. The ceiling is very high with him. I think the offense makes a lot of sense. He's a guy I'm extremely high on. I think this is a guy that you could plug in and be confident will be a great signal caller. This makes a lot of sense for me. He's really solid. Got to step up in the pocket a little bit more. Got to be more strong, confident. 6'2", 205, has a good frame. Has to be a little bit stronger in the confident in the pocket. Has to use the footwork a little bit better. I get a little concerned with some of the footwork I've seen on the tape. But this is a guy I think can lead the way. I like some of the pass catches this Cardinal team has as well. This team should be a contender in the ACC with this guy at the helm. I like what they're building there down in Kentucky. I think this is a very talented quarterback plugging in who should really get another chance. And I think, come the end of the season, we're going to be like, wow, I can't believe that guy got ran out of USC. He was very talented, very accurate, had a phenomenal season.
Yeah, and I think he's going to rise draft boards. He was rising up significantly halfway through last year as well. Momentum kind of died out for him. Looking at number 7, Thomas Castellanos. Last year, obviously, people who've followed us for a long time, they heard my thoughts on Florida State. I thought they did terrible in the portal last year. Didn't think they'd be very good, and they ended up being far worse than even I expected. And it started with the quarterback position, DJ Uyunglele. I didn't think it was a very impressive ad. And now they go out and get a guy that was benched at Boston College that I also don't think is probably the biggest of ads, just because this guy didn't really handle the way he exited BC very well because he played his way out of the position and then he decided to just leave his team. Pretty common in college football nowadays. But now that I think about it a little more, I think this guy can be good for Florida State because they need a playmaker. The O-line was bad. The run game was non-existent. The quarterback play was sporadic. This guy is an electric runner, great speed. I love the elusiveness. A real savvy playmaker. That's the best way to put it. And his ball security improved tremendously this past year. Only had 5 interceptions compared to 14 and 23. Still, his passing numbers aren't all that great. It's not really the system they operated out of Boston College. It was a run-heavy offense. He's not going to be the greatest natural passer. He's not going to be very consistent from the pocket. And downfield accuracy can be very sporadic. I think this is going to be a good addition, Nick, because Florida State desperately needs guys who can be playmakers on offense, and I think they can certainly utilize him in a variety of different ways. And Gus Malzahn, he's the one that's there now. He's going to add plenty of wrinkles that are going to be used on a weekly basis. I think Castellanos can be an impact player for Florida State. Do you think he's worthy of being in this top 10, Nick?
Yeah, I got a lot of issues with this, but I also have a lot of positives with it. Florida State, I equally felt that their portal work could have been a little bit better last year. I think long-term stability, I have a lot of question marks about and what's going on in Tallahassee because I don't think you can continue just plugging in transfer quarterbacks here. I don't think that's a long-term way to build a program. I think it's just a gamble for Mike Norvell that's really going to, show that it could really backfire very quickly. I think they got to build a better system down there. I'm concerned about the long-term future. I think they had a struggle on offense to run the ball a lot. And I think it's kind of funny how, Castellanos beat Florida State with Boston College in the first game of the season. In the first week 1 of the season, they had already lost in week 0, and by that point, the tires were already off the truck, and everything was kind of out of control down there in Tallahassee. This is a quarterback that I think is good. If you get the guy that we saw in 2023, this offense could be really good. If you get the guy you saw in 2024, you have a little bit more of a concern. I think he was really solid on the ground in 2023, 1,100 yards rushing, 5.2 yards per carry, and 13 scores. Was not as polished as a passer with 2,200 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 14 picks. This year, better in the passing game, 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 1,300 yards passing, 8.5 yards per attempt before getting benched. He's a guy, if he's playing fully confident, playing like he did in 2023, I think he can certainly be a good spark for this offense. They need to be able to run the ball here. They got to be able to find a way to get yardage in key situations. They just really could not run the ball at all. I think a lot of it relies on the quarterback and the running back room. He's a good player. If you can polish out some of the passing, you really got to kind of find a blend of the two. If you get the running quarterback that we saw in 2023 and the passer we saw in 2024, you're going to have a really good option. But the last 2 years has been either one strong and one's weak. So I think you got to find a way to hopefully get the best out of both here. Can that happen? I think it's certainly possible, but I'm not as high on it. This Florida State team is certainly a team you want to keep an eye on. They welcome Alabama week 1 and will be a tough matchup in Tallahassee.
I moved to number 6, Caden Salter. This is a guy who probably should have benefited from transferring after 2023, where he had almost 4,000 yards, 44 total touchdowns. Decides to stay at Liberty this past year, and he wasn't all that good. 56% comp rate, less than 2,000 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 6 picks. He ran for 579 and 7 scores. His final game against Sam Houston State, he was abysmal. Completed 34% for 83 yards and 2 bad picks. This is a guy who obviously wasn't surrounded by the greatest of talent at wide receiver. They didn't have many guys who could really separate and make plays, and at times really stepped up in crunch time throughout the year, I thought. But the numbers weren't very good. I think it still worked out for him. Colorado, I mean, this is a pretty respectable place to go, replacing Shadur Sanders. Shadur had a lot of mobility, Nick, but playing behind that awful offensive line, they could certainly benefit from a guy that can run the football and make plays on designed QB runs. So I think this is beneficial for both parties. This guy does have good arm strength, can really drive the ball. He's a good playmaker, can really layer the football. Size isn't the greatest. Processing at times can be iffy, and he can get lazy and throw some late footballs. But I think this is going to be exciting for both parties, and I think you should see him kind of get back on track to how he was in 23. Is there any concerns here? Because I think this is going to work out for both sides. I don't know if he's going to put up, ungodly numbers like he did 2 years ago. But in terms of bridging from Shadur to this guy to the future and Julian Lewis, I think it's going to work out very well.
Yeah, that's a very key point there. I think this is a bridge quarterback, right? This is going to connect you from Shadur to Lewis. I think this is a good bridge quarterback. This is a guy that's a veteran, been around college football 3 years as a starter, had a really strong 2023, which saw this Liberty team play really good in the Conference USA and play some dominant football, 2,800 yards passing, 32 touchdowns, 6 picks. Really good performances there, plus 1,100 yards on the ground and 12 scores. A lot of those numbers were dialed back, right? 1,000 less yards passing, way less touchdowns, same number of picks, and then half the yards rushing, 500 yards less rushing for him, and only 7 scores this year. They did not play great football this year, right? Liberty, a lot of people thought they could potentially be winning the Conference USA and be in the college football playoff. What could this team look like? They played some weak games. They struggled at times. Salter lacked confidence in certain situations. His QBR was 48.6, 89th in the country. Definitely not the level that he wanted to be at this year. Struggled with some accuracy as well with 56% comp rate, a little bit below what you're hoping. Yes, the talent jump at Colorado will certainly be extreme, and he's going to be playing with some extremely talented players now. This is a guy that has high potential. Again, I feel a little weak on this one. I thought there were better fits. I thought maybe Syracuse could have been a better fit for him. This is a guy that I think has some good arm strength, really can drive the ball, great mechanics overall. I think plugging him into a high-flying offense like Colorado could work out well. Going to be a wait and see for me. I want to see the first couple weeks how they play out. A lot of talent up there in Boulder, so that's going to be certainly strong for him to work with. Just was a bit lazy this year, did not play with a lot of confidence, struggled to make some of those key passes. Can he get back to his old form? I think that's something you have to wait and see, but this could really work out well for Colorado. This guy has a lot of talent if he plays up to his full potential.
Now we move to number 5, Devon Dampier. I absolutely love this addition. At some point last year, I said to you, I was like, man, Utah has a major quarterback problem. Their fans agreed with me on social media. They had 4 different guys play quarterback last year. As a team, we had 20 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. Cam Rising, of course, after 9 years, finally is done. And he just wasn't that good following numerous, knee injuries. It sucks that that's how his career ended, because this is a guy that had so many opportunities and just so much for Utah. That's just how his career comes to an end. Isaac Wilson wasn't all that good. Was a young player, showed flashes at times. And Brandon Rose, he was like their 4th-string quarterback. All these guys are gone, Nick. They went out and got Devon Dampier. He played in New Mexico, and this is a team that had a bit of a unique schedule, so we were able to watch them quite often throughout the year. And every time we did, this team was so fun to watch because this guy put on a show. I picked them to upset Washington State as double-digit underdogs late in the year. They won that game outright. This is a guy that is very exciting, really, because of how good he is as a runner. 1,166 yards, 19 touchdowns. He had nearly 200 rushing and 3 scores in that upset over Wazoo. As a passer, though, wasn't all that great. He did have over 2,700 yards, 12 touchdowns, also had 12 interceptions. That's an area of his game where he's still going to grow at. He's a young player, but he does throw a good fastball. Obviously the skills as a runner is going to be very important for this team. Plays with a lot of swagger to him, Nick. This guy has so much confidence, gives his team a chance. It'll be interesting to see how he grows as a passer, though, because his accuracy is sporadic. The ball security isn't all that great. Standing in the pocket and diagnosing, that's going to be a big area of concern for him. Still relatively a young player moving into his junior season, but I think the Utes have finally figured out their quarterback problem that has been long-standing in this program.
This is a star quarterback that we got to watch at New Mexico a lot this year, more than some other teams. A guy, in Dampier that I really like watching. I think he's a very talented player, really solid on the ground, a really good player with nice speed, a really nice acceleration, really burst off the line there. 1,100 yards rushing, 7.5 yards to carry, and 19 scores. An 85-yard rushing touchdown was one of his touchdowns as well. That's a pretty impressive number there. Passing obviously has to improve, right? 2,700 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 12 picks is not great. Only took 5 sacks this year, played with a decent offensive line. Got to be a little more accurate. 58% comp rate is a little too low. A lot of high potential here with this guy, right? Utah, they've struggled over the past couple of years. It's a shame because Cam Rising was a great quarterback to watch, but the injuries just made him not the same, and they struggled over the past couple of years. It just really wasn't working anymore. Now they move on and they plug in a guy here that I think is a high potential, a lot of upside here, right? This is a kid that's very talented. Watched a lot more of him than I expected to this year. Dynamic, really solid, a lot of misdirection, really good, keeps defenders on their toe. Certainly something you have to keep an eye on. A very good runner. I think you can grow in the passing game, right? I think the coaching can certainly work on that. I wonder what the offensive coordinator and what the offensive staff is going to do at Utah, but I think this is a guy that you can work with and develop and make him more accurate and get him to a bit of a better passer. 5'10", 200 pounds, roughly, the product out of Scottsdale, Arizona. This is a guy I like. This is a guy I think that can really elevate this offense. Utah, they've been looking to try and figure out the offense. The defense has been really strong the past couple of seasons under Kyle Whittingham. Can this quarterback be the one that leads them to prominence in the Big 12? I think it's possible. This is a guy that if you work on him in the offseason, he could really be a great project quarterback that can lead this team into some solid positions.
And of course, his offensive coordinator in Jackson Beck, he's now at Utah, so continuing that pairing going, I think, is beneficial for them. Moving to number 4, Fernando Mendoza from Cal to Indiana. This is a guy I thought would probably go to his hometown team in Miami. He decides to go to the Hoosiers, and he's going to fill a big void. Curtis Rourke's departing, and he's a very similar style to that of Rourke in terms of size and play style. Guy who has good mobility, better than Rourke's, of course. Keeps eyes downfield on the run, can make a lot of throws while running. Good touch thrower. I think he's a great scheme fit here in Cignetti's offense that also returns its top 2 receivers in Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper. Doesn't have the strongest arm. Velocity downfield can waver from time to time. We'll need to prove he can fire into the tight windows consistently, because a lot of his plays were him just making things happen at Cal. I really think this is a good fit. This is an Indiana team that made the CFP. Only 2 losses came against the teams that were competing in the national championship game. So there's a lot of momentum in this program right now. Big shoes to fill, but I think this is a pretty good addition here, Nick. You wonder how you're going to fill the void of him and Mendoza. He should be here for at least the next 2 years, I would say. Very big opportunity here in front of Indiana with this addition.
I actually love this move a lot. I think this is a phenomenal move that could really work out well here. I think Mendoza's a great quarterback. You saw him improve a lot this past season at Cal. Had 1,700 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, 10 picks in 2023. Cut down the interceptions, only had 6 in 24, 16 touchdowns, 3,000 yards passing. Got a lot more accurate as well. Went from a 63% comp rate to about a 69% comp rate. So a nice 6% boost there. You saw it in the Auburn game. That was a game where I really watched him. He was very accurate, hit some really nice touchdown throws in that game. Looked comfortable in the pocket, looked confident. Also, can run if he needs to in small situations. Good in the short game. Not a whole lot of yardage there, but you can get him involved in the red zone occasionally. Really solid in the pocket presence. I think he's a really big physical guy that has some strong arm strength as well. 6'5", 225. I mean, he's huge, right? The frame is massive. He's been accurate this year. I think this is a guy that really does better. The arm strength is not phenomenal. The velocity has a little bit of issues, but overall, I think the scheme fits great. I think he's really good downfield, makes a lot of throws in the run while rolling out of the pocket. This move makes a lot of sense for me. This is a guy that's really solid. I think Cignetti can really coach this guy and turn him into a star. He's not going to run as much as Curtis Rourke did, but I think he's still going to be really solid for this team. This is a good leader, a veteran, a guy that knows the sport pretty well. I love this fit a lot. I'm extremely high on it. Even though he's just a sophomore, he could be there for a while. He's still got 2 years of starting experience under his belt already. A very talented player that could be really strong for this Indiana team. I don't think they're going to skip a beat at all in Bloomington. This is a great quarterback, plug and play. Really works well for me here.
Now I move to number 3, Jackson Arnold. A lot of people probably might disagree with this one, but I'm completely sold. He's going to be great at Auburn. This is a guy who was a former 5-star quarterback. Had flashes of some greatness in that bowl game where he got the start against Arizona. Had 361 and 2 touchdowns. Had 3 bad interceptions. That's a great defense they were playing, though, in his first career start. And he was impressive at times, poor at others. Entering 2024, Nick, we talked about how their offensive line would be a problem. They lost all 5 starters, and they're even worse than we thought. So they were bad up front. the top like 7 receivers were injured the entire season. So I think he was catching a lot of unnecessary flack. I know he ended up getting benched in that Tennessee game for a couple of weeks, ended up coming back, played some better ball against some tough opponents. Overall, it wasn't a pretty way to end the year. Some confidence maybe in his back pocket as he, ran for 100 plus yards in that upset win over Alabama before bolting here for the Crimson Tide's rival. I think this is a great fit, Nick. Hugh Freeze finally goes out and gets a quarterback. Offensive line really improving there for Auburn. They have great receivers. Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson. I mean, this is a dream-made match, I would assume, because this is a guy that's shown the ability to be a touch passer, has shown good IQ, controls the velocity well, has awareness in the pocket. The vision is inconsistent, though. He can get antsy under pressure, and the mental processing still needs to be worked on. But last year, I'm going to call it a scratch. That's exactly what it was with all the negatives I listed at Oklahoma, Nick. It was just a perfect full circle of bad for Arnold to fail as a first-year starter, and that's what he did. He looked bad, and Auburn, they're going to reap the benefits.
Yeah, an up and down scratch year at Oklahoma. This guy's still got a lot of talent. He's a 5-star out of high school, obviously a very talented quarterback. Auburn's been looking for a quarterback, right? That's been the biggest issue for Hugh Freeze. They haven't been able to get a quarterback, and as a Bama fan, I'm a little nervous now that they got a quarterback here. I think Arnold could be really good for this team. The accuracy was solid, 62% comp rate this year, 1,400 yards passing. 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, but really a lot of that doesn't particularly matter. They went up and down, bad offensive line issues, with benching him, moving, things like that. I think it's more about what he did in high school. 6'1", 210 product out of Denton, Texas, a guy that's really solid, great accuracy, high IQ on the football field, really good in the pocket, can move, can run a little bit here. This is a high upside move here. This makes a lot of sense. You have a really talented wide receiver room with incredible pieces. You just didn't have a guy that could really get the ball to them with their quarterbacks play. They struggled a lot. That was a big issue for Auburn, and now they plug in a quarterback here that's a lot better than Peyton Thorne, in my opinion, and a guy that can really elevate this offense. I think this could be the sky's limit now. If Hugh Freeze can't get it done with Jackson Arnold, then I start to question what Hugh Freeze is doing down there on the plains, but I think this move is really good, and this move is a top 5 move in terms of portal quarterbacks. This makes a lot of sense, and it certainly gets Auburn in the conversation to be a contender in the SEC and be potential to make the expanded playoff. I've seen a lot of people be very high on the Tigers. This has got to be the year for them, really, when you look at it based off what they're doing here. I think Arnold's a great quarterback. You plug him in, you should see a lot of success early on in the Plains.
Yeah, and they also added Eric Singleton, an elite receiver, and Horatio Fields, so they're absolutely loaded at talent. So I think Arnold will have a great year, and I think playoffs are certainly in the cards for them. Moving to number 2, Carson Beck replacing Cam Ward. The way things ended at Georgia, not great. It was a tough year for him. Played himself out of potentially being the number 1 overall pick. Goes down with an ugly, arm injury in the SEC title game, and he ends up departing for what looked like would be the NFL draft. And then Miami brought out the checkbook, and he decides to go there, replacing Ward. And this is a great fit, I think. It was a tough year for Beck, Nick. It wasn't all on him. The team had a lot of drops. He was certainly trying to force things a little bit more. I think he was playing with a little bit more urgency at times due to some of those weaknesses. It can certainly cause you to lose your calm and not play to the level you're capable of. That first half against Alabama was abysmal, right? The second half was incredible, though. He put on a complete clinic, and that consistency was just not there all season long with his accuracy and ball placement. Really didn't seem to step up much as a leader. This guy's great size, 6'4", 220. Forcing a lot of throws is something that you're hoping he can pull back on. In the past, he's shown great ability to rip it. He's still a veteran. He's tough to slow down when he's in rhythm. That second half against Bama was a good example of that, Nick. And his downfield accuracy, for the most part, is pretty good. This is a good starter here, and it's just kind of unfortunate how it worked out for him. But I think Miami, they're incredibly happy with how things have worked out. What do you make of this whole ordeal with him, committing very late in the cycle in his up and down play last year?
This is a very interesting move here. I think this move makes a lot of sense for all parties involved because, Beck wasn't really going to be drafted very high, had a very bad season. This is a guy that still has a lot of talent. He came into Georgia and really had high expectations because of what the success they had under Stetson Bennett. They thought that they could just really plug in Beck and continue what they were doing. He's had 2 seasons that were okay at times, but Georgia, failed to win a national championship in both seasons, failed to make the playoffs in 2023, made the playoffs this past season, but lost in their first matchup. This is a guy that, was really solid, was really good in 2023, right? 72% comp rate, 3,900 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 6 picks. Those numbers tailed off a lot in 2024, 64% comp rate, 35 3,400 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. This move makes a lot of sense for Miami, right? They needed a quarterback after Cam Ward left. They paid him a lot of money. They bring him in. I didn't think he had a really high draft stock. Now he has an opportunity to rebuild his draft stock and play in an offense that really has a lot of talented weapons in a Miami team that should be contending for a playoff. I think this makes a lot of sense. There was a lot of questions marks early, even before this kind of transfer worked out. There was people saying, well, I don't think Beck should go to the pros. There were some rumors that Alabama may have been looking at him. Miami certainly looked at him. Miami gave him a lot of money. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a gamble, right? This could be a blow up in your face type moment here. Miami, they've struggled to really make the playoffs despite having really good rosters. And we saw that this past year with Cam Ward. But also, Ward's draft stock has really climbed to new heights. He should be picked in the top 5 in the NFL draft. Beck is hoping he can do the same. Also, of course, got to mention his girlfriend plays basketball at Miami, so I certainly think that factored into it as well. That makes a lot of sense for him in this regard. He's, a really good veteran, a guy that's been around, has good downfield accuracy, but he was forcing throws, looked uncomfortable at times, was making bad decisions, looked rattled. I think the moment was too big for him at Georgia. A little less pressure at Miami, I would say, but still a high-pressure environment and a team that should compete in an easier conference than the SEC. This should be a home run for all involved, but again, you have to kind of question it because of how bad 2024 went for Beck. So going to have to keep my eye on this one as it develops.
Offensive line is pretty shaky for Georgia as well. Cam Ward, on the other hand, had clean pockets for days. You're going to see a lot of those for Beck. Moving to number 1, John Mateer. This is a guy that I absolutely loved watching last year, at Washington State. Played a pretty weak schedule, right? So, of course, it might totally backfire now that you step into the SEC, follows his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, to the Sooners. That's important to note. This is a playbook he doesn't have to relearn. He can help come in and coach up his fellow new weapons. This is a team that, again, had a lot of injuries last year at receiver, and then those guys all decided to enter the transfer portal, even the ones that were healthy. So a complete exodus at pass catcher. Deion Burks is returning, though. He should have a big year. This guy can often look to scramble too quickly, sometimes can put too much ball in the air, but for the most part, I love watching this player. A snappy release, a very strong arm. He's a great runner, very nifty in the open field. He, has crafty arm angles. The speed checks out, as a runner. The change of direction is pretty impressive. This is a guy who's very fun to watch, Nick. Kind of getting some potentially Jaden Daniels vibes here. A guy that played at a Pac-12 school, looked good on offense, went to the SEC and dominated. Do you think that is in the cards for John Mateer? Because I think it potentially is, but the uptick in competition is something to be wary of and could totally lead to a backfire for the Sooners.
Yeah, the uptick in competition is certainly difficult, but this is a guy that's the number 1 quarterback in the portal class, leaps and bounds in my opinion. It makes a lot of sense. This is a guy that's so talented, really possesses a lot. I think, the playbook, keeping the same playbook will really help him out. Strong arm, great runner, really solid, very accurate as well. 64% comp rate, solid, 3,100 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, plus the 800 plus rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. This is a guy that can do it all. Dual threat. The 7 interceptions was a solid low number here. Put up a lot of yards some of these games. Getting a lot of traction for the Heisman, potentially at 6'1", 220. I like what the frame can do. I think the arm strength is phenomenal. I think this is a great fit, right? I think the Oklahoma Arnold was a good fit for them, but I think this is a better fit here. I think this guy can really elevate. As long as the O-line play is better this year, I know they went out and tried to work on some of the O-line. The weapons are solid at Oklahoma. I think this is a guy that can really work. We saw Ward jump from Washington State to Miami and really excel and have a phenomenal season. I think something similar to that could happen here with Mateer, who's just a really incredible player. He was the top fish in the transfer portal for quarterbacks. Oklahoma went out and got him. This makes a lot of sense. This makes them very competitive in the SEC, in my opinion. This is a really good move. The play calling should be good with the play caller coming over from Wazoo following his quarterback, or the quarterback following the play caller, maybe, if you want to look at it that way. I like this a lot. This is the best player in the quarterback class for me out of the portal. This makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to see what this offense looks like under the new signal caller.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me, breaking down this list of transfer portal quarterbacks. A lot of good names here, a lot of stuff to be excited about, and I think you're going to see a lot of these guys competing for the Heisman.
The offseason's here. Going to talk a lot about what's coming up in the future. A lot of good, strong pieces moved around the offseason. A lot to talk about. I know the national championship just happened, but we can look forward to the future. I like what these 10 quarterbacks could do for the new teams.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.